Did the man who sold over 1 billion records die alone? How could a person surrounded by adoring fans sing about being so lonesome he could cry? He was the king. He had everything. But his songs tell a different story. They weren't just songs. They were windows into a life that was far more complicated and far more tragic than the sequin jumpsuits let on. The characters in his music, the lonely lovers, the prisoners, the boys searching for a home, they weren't just characters. I think they were him. And in the grooves of those records, you can hear the story of a man who got everything he ever wanted and lost himself along the way. Number 18 was Everything Really All Right, Mama. Elvis Presley's first professional recording, That's All Right, was cut on July 5th, 1954. He was only 19 years old. The song was a cover of a blues tune by Arthur Big Boy Crudup, a man who would later struggle financially while Elvis's version sold millions. Sun Records owner Sam Phillips didn't even get the title right on the first pressings, listing it as That's All Right, Mama. The song is a declaration of independence, a boy telling his mother and the world that he's going to be okay. He's leaving town, he's breaking free, the lyrics are simple. That's all right, Mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do. It's a reassurance, a promise. A young man stepping out on his own. But Elvis was never really on his own. His mother, Gladys, was the center of his universe. Their bond was intense, almost unnervingly so. They had their own private language. He called her by pet names. When he started making money, the very first thing he did was buy her things. A pink Cadillac she couldn't even drive. A home, Graceland, that was meant to be a family sanctuary with her at its heart. The lyrics say, I'm leaving town, baby. I'm leaving town for sure. Then you won't be bothered with me hanging around your door. For the character in the song, leaving is a solution. It's a clean break. For Elvis, leaving was the problem. Every tour, every movie shoot was a painful separation from Gladys. He would call her constantly, his phone bill's astronomical just to hear her voice. He needed her reassurance more than she needed his. The song was a performance of confidence, but the man singing it was a boy terrified of being away from his mother. Gladys worried constantly. She saw the world that was swallowing her son whole, the screaming girls, the demanding schedule, the people who wanted a piece of him. She feared for his safety, his health, his soul. She was a simple country woman who had raised her son in a 2-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. Now, he was living a life neither of them could comprehend. Her health began to decline rapidly as his fame grew. The stress and the worry ate away at her. The song's title, That's All Right, becomes a tragic refrain in the context of his life. He was always trying to convince her and maybe himself that everything was fine. He was just a boy from Tupelo who could sing. He would take care of her. He would be safe. But it wasn't all right. The world was pulling him in 1,000 different directions. The pressure was immense. And his mother was fading. When he was drafted into the army in 1958, it was a devastating blow. He was stationed in Germany, thousands of miles away. It was the longest and farthest they had ever been apart. While he was away, Gladys got sick. Her condition worsened quickly. Elvis was granted emergency leave to fly home, but he arrived just in time to see her before she passed away. She was only 46 years old. He was inconsolable. His bandmates said they had never seen such grief. At her funeral, he reportedly cried out, "Everything I have is gone." The boy who sang, "That's All Right, Mama," had lost the very person he was trying to reassure. The foundation of his world had crumbled. After her death, he was never the same. A part of him shut down. The playful, carefree energy of his early years began to fade, replaced by a deep-seated sadness. He was still Elvis Presley, the superstar, but the boy who just wanted to make his mama proud was lost. He spent the rest of his life searching for something to fill the void she left. He looked for it in women, in his entourage, in spirituality, and ultimately in the prescription medications that would numb the pain. The song, his very first hit, is supposed to be about a confident departure, a boy stepping into his future. But for Elvis, it represents the beginning of a journey that took him further and further away from the one person who kept him grounded. He was telling his mama it was all right, but The truth was, after he left that small world they shared, nothing was ever really all right again. Number 17, what was he protecting besides his shoes? Carl Perkins wrote and first recorded Blue Suede Shoes in 1955. The idea came from a story Johnny Cash told him about a soldier who was more concerned about his military-issue shoes than anything else. Elvis recorded his version in 1956, and it became a massive hit, one of the first songs to chart on pop, R&B, and country charts simultaneously. On the surface, the song is about a guy with a new pair of shoes. It's a warning. You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoes. You can knock him down, step on his face, slander his name all over the place. Just don't mess with the shoes. It's a line in the sand, a declaration of personal boundaries centered on a piece of footwear, but for Elvis, it was always about more than the shoes. The blue suede shoes represent a carefully constructed identity. In the 1950s, Elvis was creating something new. He was a white kid from Mississippi singing black music. He was a polite, God-fearing boy who moved on stage in a way that scandalized the nation. He was a truck driver who became a king. This identity was his ticket out of poverty, his armor against the world. The lyric, "Lay off of my shoes," was a metaphor for lay off of me. Leave my identity alone. Don't try to change me. Don't try to sand down my edges. Don't try to make me into something I'm not. In the early days, he faced immense criticism. Preachers called him a devil. The press called him a vulgar threat to American youth. They stepped on his face and slandered his name. They wanted to change his hair, his clothes, his sound, his moves. He was fiercely protective of this new persona because it was all he had. It was his creation. Before Blue Suede Shoes, he was Elvis Presley, a poor boy from Tupelo. After he was Elvis, a cultural phenomenon. The shoes were the symbol of that transformation. To attack the shoes was to attack the very thing that made him special, the thing that saved him from a life of driving a truck. As his career progressed, this parallel became even more tragic. The very identity he fought to protect became his prison. The world didn't want Elvis Presley, the man. They wanted Elvis Presley, the icon. They wanted the swagger, the sneer, the gyrating hips. They wanted the blue suede shoes. Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, understood this better than anyone. He meticulously managed Elvis's image, packaging, and selling it for maximum profit. The wild rebel of the 50s was tamed and put into a string of formulaic Hollywood movies in the 60s. The character he played was always the same, a handsome, singing rebel who was ultimately harmless. His identity, once a radical act of self-expression, became a product. People were no longer just stepping on his shoes. They were owning them, manufacturing them, and selling them back to him. He felt the loss of his authentic self deeply. He complained to friends about the terrible movies and the bland, forgettable songs he had to sing for the soundtracks. He missed the raw energy of playing live music. He was trapped in the very image he had once defended. He had drawn a line in the sand with his blue suede shoes, but the world, led by his own manager, had crossed it and built a fortress around him. In his later years during the Las Vegas era, the identity became a costume. The jumpsuit, the cape, the oversized sunglasses. It was an exaggerated version of the 50s rebel, a caricature. He was still singing about the blue suede shoes, but now it felt like an echo. He was protecting a memory, an idea of who he used to be. The man inside the jumpsuit was lost, isolated, and profoundly lonely. The song is a defiant anthem of individuality, but the life of the man who made it famous is a cautionary tale about what happens when that individuality becomes a brand. He was so busy protecting the shoes that he lost sight of the man wearing them. The world could do anything to him as long as they loved his image. And in the end they did. Number 16, Did He Ever Find a Love That Was Tender? Love Me Tender was released in 1956. The melody is adapted from the Civil War ballad Ara Lee. Elvis performed it on The Ed Sullivan Show before the movie of the same name was even released, and it caused a sensation. The record went to number 1, and RCA received over 1 million advance orders, a first in the industry at the time. The song is the ultimate promise of gentle, unconditional love. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. It's a simple, direct plea. It speaks of a perfect, all-encompassing love that will last forever. For my darling, I love you, and I always will. Elvis sang these words with a sincerity that made millions of people believe him. They fell in love with the man singing the song, a man who seemed to embody this ideal of tender, devoted love. But in his own life, that kind of love was always just out of reach. His first great love was his mother, Gladys. That love was fierce and protective, but it was also complicated and codependent. It was the bedrock of his emotional life, and its loss left a wound that never healed. After she was gone, he spent his life looking for a woman who could fill that role. He was searching for a new anchor, someone to make his life complete again. He met Priscilla Beaulieu when she was just 14 years old, while he was stationed in Germany. He was 24, a global superstar, grieving the loss of his mother. He saw in Priscilla a chance to mold a perfect partner. He could shape her into his ideal woman, someone who would understand him, cater to his needs, and be his constant, loving presence. He wrote to her, called her, and eventually convinced her parents to let her move to Graceland. Their courtship was a strange fairy tale. She lived at his home, a living doll in his gilded cage. He controlled what she wore, how she did her hair, how she acted. He wanted to preserve her innocence, to create a perfect, pure love untouched by the outside world. He was trying to build the love me tender ideal from scratch. They married in 1967 and had their daughter Lisa Marie exactly 9 months later. But the reality of marriage was not like the song. Elvis was a hard man to be married to. He was constantly on the road or making movies. He was surrounded by his entourage, the Memphis Mafia, who created a barrier between him and the rest of the world, including his wife. He was a night owl who lived a strange, insular existence within the walls of Graceland. He expected Priscilla to be there for him, always waiting, always understanding. But he was not always tender in return. He could be moody, distant, and controlling. The perfect love he sang about was a one-way street. He needed to be loved tenderly, but he struggled to provide that same consistent tenderness himself. The pressures of his fame, his unresolved grief, and his increasing reliance on prescription pills created a chasm between them. The song says, "Never let me go," but Priscilla eventually had to. She felt she was losing her own identity. She was living his life, not her own. Their divorce in 1973 was a major blow to Elvis. In his mind, he had failed to keep his perfect family together. He had lost the woman he had tried to create in the image of his ideal love. After Priscilla, there were other women like Linda Thompson who cared for him deeply. But the pattern remained. He was the sun, and they were expected to be planets in his orbit. He craved the simple, complete love of the song, but the complexities of his own life, his fame, his trauma, his habits made it impossible to sustain. He sang "Love Me Tender" thousands of times throughout his career. It was always a showstopper. In the later years, his performances of the song were often tinged with a palpable sadness. He would hand out scarves to weeping women in the audience, a king bestowing favors. But the man on stage was profoundly lonely. He was giving away a fantasy of love that he himself had never managed to hold on to. He had made so many lives feel complete with that song, but his own remained fractured. Number 15, was he the loneliest man at the end of Lonely Street? Heartbreak Hotel was Elvis's first million-selling single, released in 1956. The song was written by Mae Boren Axton and Tommy Durden, inspired by a newspaper article about a man who had destroyed his identity papers and left a note that said, "I walk a lonely street." The imagery is dark and desolate for a pop song of that era, hotel at the end of Lonely Street, where broken-hearted lovers go to cry. The lyrics paint a grim picture. The desk clerk's dressed in black. The bellhop's tears keep flowing. The desk clerk's fingers are numb. It's a place of permanent sorrow. The finality of the last line is chilling. They'll be so lonely they could die. This wasn't a song about a temporary breakup. It was about a place of utter despair. When Elvis recorded it, the RCA executives were horrified. It sounded nothing like his Sun records. It was slow, bluesy, and full of reverb, creating an eerie, cavernous sound. They thought it would kill his career. But Elvis insisted. He understood the song. He felt it. He was just 21 years old, on the cusp of a level of fame the world had never seen. Yet, he connected with this song about ultimate loneliness. This connection would become the most tragic parallel of his life. And Elvis Presley, the man who was desired and adored by millions, was one of the loneliest people on the planet. His fame built a wall around him. He couldn't go out to a restaurant, a movie, or a store without causing a riot. He became a prisoner in his own home, Graceland. The mansion was his sanctuary, but it was also his Heartbreak Hotel. Like the hotel in the song, Graceland was a place people checked into, but rarely checked out of. He surrounded himself with his entourage, the Memphis Mafia. They were his friends, his employees, his bodyguards. They lived with him, traveled with him, and created a buffer between him and the real world. But this constant companionship did not cure his loneliness. In fact, it often amplified it. He was the boss, the king. The relationships were inherently unequal. He could never be sure if people were there for him or for the lifestyle he provided. He was surrounded by people, but he was not one of them. He was on a different plane, isolated by his own legend. The song describes a place where broken-hearted lovers cry. Elvis's romantic life was a string of heartbreaks. His divorce from Priscilla left a deep scar. He sought love and companionship, but his fame and the strange reality of his life made true equal partnership almost impossible. The women who entered his life had to adapt to his nocturnal world, his moods, his entourage, and his dependencies. Many loved him, but the circumstances were too difficult to overcome. Graceland saw its share of tears. The final dark premonition of the song, "They'll be so lonely they could die," hangs over his final years. As his health declined and his reliance on prescription drugs increased, his isolation deepened. He would spend days locked in his bedroom, reading, watching TV, and trying to numb a pain that fame and money could not touch. His friends and loved ones watched helplessly as he drifted further away. He was in a hotel of his own making, at the end of his own lonely street. The irony is staggering. The man who brought so much joy and connection to millions through his music was himself profoundly disconnected. He would stand on stage in Las Vegas, a sea of adoring faces before him, and then retreat to his empty penthouse suite, a lonely king in a gilded cage. He was the living embodiment of his first major hit. He checked into the Heartbreak Hotel in 1956, and he never really left. Number 14, Who Was Really Being Cruel? Released in 1956 as the B-side to Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, became a massive hit in its own right. Written by Otis Blackwell, the song is a simple, direct plea from a lover. Don't be cruel to a heart that's true. It's a call for kindness, for reciprocation. I don't want no other love, baby. It's just you I'm thinking of. Elvis's performance is playful and confident. He's not begging. He's stating a fact. He's in love. He's true. And he expects the same in return. The song became an anthem for anyone who felt they were being treated unfairly in a relationship. It's about demanding respect and gentleness from the one you love. But the question of cruelty in Elvis's own life is far more complex. Who was being cruel to him, and who was he cruel to? The lines are tragically blurred. From one perspective, the world was cruel to him. The music industry, embodied by his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, saw him as a commodity. And Parker's primary goal was to make money. He negotiated deals that gave him an unprecedented 50% of Elvis's earnings. He pushed Elvis into a decade of lackluster Hollywood movies because they were a safe and predictable source of income. He stifled Elvis's creative ambitions, turning down roles in serious films like West Side Story and A Star is Born. This was a form of professional cruelty, trapping a uniquely talented artist in a cage of mediocrity for profit. Elvis knew it and he resented it, but he felt powerless to stop it. He had a heart that was true to his music, but the business treated it with callous indifference. The media and the public could also be cruel. In the 50s, he was condemned as a menace. In the 70s, as his weight fluctuated and his health declined, he became a target of ridicule. The king became a punchline. The pressure to maintain his image, to be the eternally young, handsome rebel, was immense and unforgiving. This public scrutiny was a constant, cruel weight on his shoulders, but there's another side to the story. In his personal life, Elvis himself could be cruel, often without meaning to be. The song says, "Don't you know I can be found, sitting home all alone." This was his reality. But when people entered that home, they entered his world on his terms. His relationship with Priscilla is a prime example. He loved her, but his control over her life, her appearance, her friends, her freedom was a form of cruelty. It stemmed from his own insecurity and his desire to create a perfect, safe world. But the impact on her was suffocating. His temper was famous among his inner circle. He could be incredibly generous, buying cars and homes for friends and even strangers. But he could also fly into rages, his frustration and unhappiness boiling over. He was the center of his universe, and everyone around him was expected to cater to his whims. This dynamic, while perhaps unintentional, could be hurtful to those who loved him most. They had to walk on eggshells, always managing the king's moods. The ultimate cruelty, however, was perhaps the one he inflicted upon himself. He had a heart that was true, a deep capacity for love, a genuine spirituality, and a once-in-a-generation talent. But he allowed his own insecurities, his grief, and his addictions to slowly destroy him. He neglected his health. He isolated himself. He numbed his pain with a cocktail of prescription drugs that ultimately stopped his heart. He was cruel to the gifted boy from Tupelo, the one who just wanted to sing and make his mother proud. So when he sang "Don't Be Cruel," it was a plea echoing in multiple directions. It was a plea to his manager to respect his artistry. A plea to the public to see the man behind the icon, a plea to his lovers to understand his loneliness. And perhaps most tragically, it was a plea to himself, a cry from a heart that was true, being broken by the very man it belonged to. Number 13 was Graceland, his real jailhouse. The song "Jailhouse Rock" from the 1957 movie of the same name is one of Elvis's most iconic rock and roll anthems. The lyrics describe a wild party in a prison. The warden threw a party in the county jail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. It's a vision of freedom within confinement, a riotous celebration behind bars. The famous dance sequence from the movie, choreographed by Elvis himself, became one of the most influential moments in music video history. The song is pure energy, rebellion, and fun. The characters are locked up, but they're breaking free through music and dance. The tragic parallel is that as Elvis sang about a party in a jailhouse, he was slowly building his own prison Graceland. He bought the Memphis mansion in 1957, the same year the song was released. It was meant to be a refuge, a place where he could escape the pressures of fame and live with his family. But over the years, it transformed from a sanctuary into a gilded cage. Like the county jail in the song, Graceland had its own set of rules and its own warden, Elvis himself. He lived on his own schedule, sleeping all day and staying up all night. The windows were blacked out. The temperature was kept at a constant chilly level. Anyone who wanted to be in his life had to live by these rules. They had to enter his world, his jailhouse. The bond was jumping and the joint began to swing. Graceland was famous for its own kind of parties. Elvis would rent out movie theaters and amusement parks for all-night romps with his entourage. He would host spontaneous jam sessions in the Jungle Room. There were moments of wild fun and incredible generosity. You know, from the outside, it looked like a dream life. He had created his own private kingdom where he could do whatever he wanted. But the walls were still walls. Elvis couldn't leave. A simple trip to the grocery store was impossible. He was a prisoner of his own fame. His jailers were his adoring fans, the photographers, the media. They were always waiting outside the gates. So he stayed inside, surrounded by the same faces day after day. The spontaneity of the parties couldn't hide the monotony of his confinement. The lyric "Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock" also has a dark echo. Everyone in his orbit, the Memphis Mafia, his girlfriends, his family, had to dance to his tune. Their lives revolved around him. There were inmates in his prison too, albeit willing ones. They gave up their own freedom and autonomy to be part of his world. This created an unhealthy dynamic where Elvis was rarely challenged or confronted with the reality of his declining health and drug use. The other inmates were too dependent on the warden to risk upsetting him. In the movie, Elvis's character, Vince Everett, goes to prison and becomes a star. His time in jail is a stepping stone to fame. In real life, it was the other way around. His fame was a stepping stone to a life of confinement. The more famous he became, the smaller his world got, until it was mostly confined to the 14 acres of Graceland. In his final years, the jailhouse rock was over. The house became a quiet, lonely place. He would spend most of his time in his upstairs bedroom suite, a part of the house that is still not open to the public. It was his final cell. He was the most famous man in the world, living in one of the most famous houses in the world, but he was trapped, isolated, and alone. The song is a fantasy of joyful rebellion and confinement. His life was the tragic reality of a man who built his own prison and couldn't find a way to escape. Number 12. Was he more than just a teddy bear? Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear was a #1 hit for Elvis in 1957, featured in his second film, Loving You. The song is light, charming, and playful. The lyrics are a simple proposition: baby, let me be your loving teddy bear. Put a chain around my neck and lead me anywhere. Oh, let me be your teddy bear. The song capitalized on the teddy bear craze that Elvis inadvertently started. After a story circulated that he had a collection of teddy bears, they became synonymous with his image. Fans would throw them on stage by the hundreds. The song is a clever piece of marketing, but it's also a surprisingly revealing statement. The character in the song doesn't want to be a tiger, a king on a throne. He wants to be an object of affection, a soft, cuddly, and controllable toy. This desire to be a teddy bear is a tragic parallel to how Elvis was treated and how he at times seemed to want to be treated. On one hand, he was the king of rock and roll, a powerful, rebellious figure, but on the other hand, he was a product, a possession, to be managed and controlled. The line, "put a chain around my neck and lead me anywhere," is chillingly prophetic. This is exactly the relationship he had with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. Parker put a metaphorical chain around Elvis's neck and led him down a path that was incredibly lucrative, but creatively stifling. He led him away from serious acting roles and into a decade of formulaic movies. He led him away from international tours, which Elvis longed to do, likely because Parker was an illegal immigrant and couldn't secure a U.S. passport. Elvis, the tiger of the stage, allowed himself to be led like a teddy bear on a chain. Why would he accept this? The song gives a clue: I just want to be your teddy bear. There's a passivity in that desire, a longing to be taken care of, to not have to make the hard decisions. And Elvis was a brilliant performer, but he was not a businessman. He trusted the Colonel completely, much like a child trusts a parent. He handed over control of his career and his life. He wanted someone else to handle the difficult parts so he could just be the performer, the object of affection. This dynamic also played out in his personal relationships. He wanted to be loved and adored, to be the center of someone's world, but he often shied away from the responsibilities of a true partnership. With Priscilla, he wanted her to be his living doll, his perfect companion, there for him when he needed her, but not demanding too much in return. He wanted to be her teddy bear, an object of love, not an equal partner in the messy reality of a relationship. The tragedy is that Elvis was so much more than a teddy bear. He was a musical genius who changed the course of popular culture. He was a deeply spiritual man who searched for meaning in books and conversations. He was a complex, intelligent, and often troubled human being. But the world, and in many ways Elvis himself, preferred the simpler image. The teddy bear was safe. The teddy bear was lovable. The teddy bear sold records and movie tickets. In his later years, you can see the conflict in his performances. He was the powerful karate chopping king in a jumpsuit, but he would also toss sweat-soaked scarves to the audience like trinkets. He was both the powerful tiger and the cuddly toy. But being a teddy bear is ultimately dehumanizing. It means being what other people want you to be. It means being an object, not a person. And after decades of being America's teddy bear, the man inside was worn out, frayed, and falling apart. The song is cute and catchy, but it's also the blueprint for a tragedy about a man who let others put a chain around his neck. Your number 11, Could the Roses Ever Replace His Mother? Mama Liked the Roses, released in 1969, is one of Elvis's more sentimental and lesser-known songs. It's a tender tribute to a mother, told from the perspective of a child who remembers the simple things she loved. Oh, Mama liked the roses. She grew them in the yard. But winter always came around and made the growing hard. The song is filled with gentle, loving memories. A mother comforting a child, reading the Bible, holding a small hand. It's a picture of a safe and loving childhood, anchored by a mother's presence. The recurring image of the roses symbolizes her love and her efforts to bring beauty into their lives, even when times were hard. Mama liked the roses, but most of all she cared about the way we learned to live and the love that we all shared. This song is a direct and heartbreaking parallel to Elvis's relationship with his mother, Gladys. There is no subtext or metaphor needed. The song is his story. Gladys was the center of his world. They grew up in poverty, and she worked tirelessly to provide for him. Her love was his shield against the world. The line, "Winter always came around and made the growing hard," speaks to the hardships of their early life in Tupelo. But it also serves as a metaphor for Gladys's own life. Her winter came when Elvis became famous. The stress, the worry, and the separation from her son were a harsh season that she couldn't endure. She passed away in the summer of 1958, but her personal winter had begun years earlier. Elvis recorded this song more than a decade after her death. The grief was still raw. The song is a way of keeping her memory alive, of returning to a time when he felt safe and loved unconditionally. It's a desperate attempt to reconnect with the most important person in his life. He built a monument to her at Graceland, the meditation garden where she is buried. He filled the house with her portraits, but nothing could bring her back. The final verse of the song is particularly poignant. And when I brought my mama some roses for her hair, I thought how proud she would have been that I was standing there. But I was just a little boy, and now I am a man. And Mama's gone, and I'm alone, and I'll do the best I can. This is the core of Elvis's tragedy. He achieved a level of success beyond anyone's wildest dreams. He could buy anything he wanted. He could have 1,000 roses delivered to Graceland every day, but he couldn't share any of it with the one person whose approval mattered most. All the fame, all the money, all the adoration, it was all just roses for a mother who was no longer there. His life after her death was a long, painful search for a replacement. He looked for her in other women. He looked for her in the maternal care of his female fans. He tried to recreate the feeling of her unconditional love, but it was impossible. He was no longer a little boy, he was a man, but emotionally a part of him was frozen in time, still that little boy who just wanted his mama. The line, "I'm alone and I'll do the best I can," is a devastatingly honest admission. Despite being surrounded by people, he felt completely alone. The foundation of his life was gone. He was trying his best, but his best wasn't enough to overcome the profound loss. The prescription drugs that clouded his later years were, in a way, another attempt to manage the pain of her absence. They were a chemical winter to numb the memory of a summer that was gone forever. The song is a beautiful tribute, but it's also a cry of pain. He could fill Graceland with roses, but they were just a reminder of what he had lost. The beauty of the flowers only highlighted the ugliness of the grief that he could never escape. Number 10, did the Army break more than it made? In 1958, at the absolute peak of his fame, Elvis Presley was drafted into the U.S. Army. His induction was a massive media event. He was assigned serial number 53,310,761. He served for 2 years, mostly stationed in Friedberg, Germany. The experience was immortalized in the 1960 film and soundtrack G Blues. The album G Blues is a lighthearted, romanticized take on military life. Rock songs like E.J. Blues, Shopping Around, and Doing the Best I Can are fun, upbeat, and largely devoid of any real struggle. The title track talks about the woes of Army life, Getting up early, the food, the marching, but frames it all as a temporary inconvenience before getting back to rockin' and rollin'. It was a sanitized Hollywood version of his service. The reality of his time in the army was far more complex and had a devastating lifelong impact. The army didn't make Elvis Presley. It broke him in ways that would haunt him until his death. The first and most significant event was the death of his mother, Gladys. He was thousands of miles away in Germany when she passed. The grief and guilt he felt were immense. He was a soldier, supposed to be strong and tough, but he was just a 23-year-old boy who had lost his whole world. This trauma, experienced in the isolating context of military service abroad, was a wound that never healed. The upbeat GI Blues soundtrack is a jarring contrast to the profound personal tragedy he was enduring. The second critical event was his introduction to amphetamines. He and his fellow soldiers were given stimulants by their sergeants to stay awake during long maneuvers. For Elvis, who was already struggling with the demands of his fame and his grief, these pills seemed like a miracle. They gave him energy, they helped him cope. This was the beginning of his lifelong dependence on prescription medication. The Army, an institution of discipline and order, inadvertently introduced him to the very thing that would lead to his chaotic decline. He learned to rely on pills to manage his life, a habit that started in a barracks in Germany and ended in his bedroom at Graceland. The Army also changed his music and his image. Before he was drafted, he was a raw, rebellious force of nature. When he returned, he was presented as a clean-cut, all-American hero. The GI Blues movie and album were the start of a new phase in his career. The dangerous edge was gone, replaced by a safe, family-friendly persona. Colonel Parker saw this as a brilliant marketing move, a way to broaden his appeal. But for Elvis, it was the start of a long, creatively frustrating period. The rock and roller was turned into a movie star who sang safe, forgettable songs. The Army helped to tame the rebel. Finally, it was during his time in Germany that he met 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu. This relationship would define the rest of his personal life, leading to marriage, fatherhood, and heartbreak. His Army service was the backdrop for the beginning of his most significant romantic relationship, one that was born out of his own loneliness and need for a connection while far from home. The GI Blues album presents a happy soldier doing his duty, but the reality was so much darker. His time in the Army was a pivotal turning point in his life, and nearly every turn was for the worse. And he lost his mother, he found drugs, he lost his creative edge, and he began a relationship that was built on an unequal power dynamic. The Army took the king of rock and roll and sent back a different man, one who was sadder, more dependent, and set on a path towards self-destruction. The upbeat blues he was singing were a lie. Number 9. Did he ever find his peace? Elvis Presley grew up singing gospel music. It was his first love, the foundation of his musical education. Throughout his career, no matter what kind of music he was recording, he always returned to gospel. He released several gospel albums, and his recordings of songs like How Great Thou Art and He Touched Me earned him all 3 of his Grammy Awards. One of his most cherished gospel songs was Peace in the Valley. Peace in the Valley, written by Thomas A. Dorsey in 1937, is a song of profound longing for a better place. It speaks of a world free from pain and sorrow. Oh, well, I'm tired and so weary, but I must go on. Till the Lord comes and calls me away. There'll be peace in the valley for me, someday. The song is a prayer for release, for an end to earthly struggles. It envisions a place where the bear will be gentle, and the wolves will be tame, and the lion shall lay down by the lamb. It's a vision of perfect harmony and tranquility. For Elvis, this was more than just a song. It was a genuine expression of his own spiritual quest. He was a deeply religious man, though his beliefs were often unconventional. He read countless books on spirituality and religion, from the Bible to the Quran to New Age mysticism. He was a searcher, constantly looking for answers to life's biggest questions. He was looking for peace. The irony is that his own life was the antithesis of the valley in the song. His world was not peaceful. It was a whirlwind of concerts, screaming fans, movie sets, and constant demands on his time and energy. There was no quiet, no stillness. The bears and wolves in his life were not gentle or tame. They were the pressures of fame, the greed of his manager, the insincerity of Hollywood, the loneliness of his gilded cage, and the internal demons of grief and addiction. He would often turn to gospel music in his private moments. After his shows in Las Vegas, he would gather his backup singers and members of his band in his penthouse suite and sing gospel songs until dawn. These sessions were not performances. They were a form of therapy, a way for him to reconnect with something pure and true. And he was trying to sing himself into that peaceful valley. He was using the music to soothe his own tired and so weary soul. The lyrics, "The morning is bright, and the Lamb is the light, and the night is as fair as the day," describe a world without darkness. Elvis, however, lived much of his life in a self-imposed night. He blacked out the windows at Graceland and lived on a nocturnal schedule, turning day into night. His world was often dark, both literally and figuratively. The peace he sang about was a distant dream, something he hoped for in the afterlife because he could not find it on Earth. His search for peace led him down many paths. He sought it through his relationships, through his study of different faiths, and through his music. But it always eluded him. The chaos of his life was too powerful. In his final years, his health deteriorated and his performances became erratic. The weariness he sang about in Peace in the Valley was visible on his face and audible in his voice. He was a man who was struggling to go on. He sang the song with such conviction because he believed in its promise. He believed that someday the struggles would end and he would find that valley of peace. It's a tragic thought that a man who brought so much joy to so many people was himself in such desperate need of comfort. He pointed others toward the light, but he himself was lost in the shadows. He never found his peace in the valley on this earth. He could only sing about it, and hope it was waiting for him. Number 8 was he always searching for something he couldn't find. Kentucky Rain, recorded in 1969, was a major comeback hit for Elvis. It's a powerful, dramatic story song. The narrator is walking through a cold Kentucky rain, searching for a woman who has left him. He's desperate, tired, and losing hope. 7 lonely days and a long, long night of pain. All I care about is to find her once again. The song is a frantic search. The music builds in intensity, mirroring his growing desperation. He's walking with the rain and the wind that blows, driven by a singular mission to find what he has lost. The rain isn't just weather, it's a symbol of his sorrow and the bleakness of his quest. This image of a man, alone, walking through the rain, searching for something vital he has lost, is a perfect metaphor for Elvis's entire adult life. He was always searching. In the most literal sense, he was searching for love. After his mother died, he spent his life looking for a woman who could provide that same sense of security and unconditional love. He thought he found it with Priscilla, but the pressures of his life tore them apart. The character in Kentucky Rain is looking for one specific woman, but Elvis was looking for an ideal, a feeling of completeness that always seemed to slip through his fingers. He was walking through the lonely landscape of his fame, looking for a true partner to share it with. He was also searching for creative fulfillment. After years of making bland Hollywood movies and recording mediocre soundtracks, he was desperate to be taken seriously as an artist again. The 1968 comeback special was a triumphant return to form, and recording sessions in Memphis in 1 Sir 969 that produced Kentucky Rain and Suspicious Minds were a creative renaissance. He was searching for the raw, authentic musician he had been in the 1950s. He found it for a while, but the relentless grind of the Las Vegas residencies soon took over, and he once again found himself singing the same songs night after night. The search for meaningful work was a constant struggle. More profoundly, Elvis was on a spiritual search. He was a man with a deep faith, but he was also full of questions. He read hundreds of books on religion and philosophy, from the autobiography of a yogi to the impersonal life. He would have long, late-night conversations with his friends, particularly his hairdresser, Larry Geller, about the meaning of life, God, and the afterlife. He was searching for answers, for a truth that could explain his extraordinary life and soothe his troubled soul. Like the man in the song, he was walking through a metaphorical storm, looking for a light to guide him. The song's narrator is driven by a powerful memory of love. Showed me a world where I felt I was a king. Elvis actually was a king, but his kingdom felt empty. He had the throne, the castle, the adoring subjects. But he was searching for the feeling that made it all worthwhile. He was searching for a sense of purpose beyond the fame and money. The final lines of Kentucky Rain are filled with exhaustion and fading hope. Kentucky rain keeps pouring down, and I'm feeling so alone. This was Elvis's state in his final years. The search had worn him out. He hadn't found what he was looking for, not in love, not in his career, not even in his spiritual quests. He was still walking, but the rain was colder, and he was more alone than ever. The song is a 3-minute drama about a lost love, but it's also the lifelong story of a man who had everything, and was still searching for the one thing he could never seem to find a reason for at all. Number 7, did he ever escape the ghetto? In 1969, Elvis Presley released In the Ghetto, a song that was a stunning departure from his usual material. Written by Mac Davis, it's a narrative song about the cycle of poverty and hopelessness. It tells the story of a boy born to a poor mother in a Chicago ghetto. He grows up hungry, learns to steal and fight, and is eventually killed, just as another baby is born into the same desperate circumstances. The song's chorus is a stark, direct plea. And his mama cries, because if there's one thing that she don't need, it's another hungry mouth to feed in the ghetto. It's a song of social commentary, a raw look at a world far removed from the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas. Many people, including Colonel Parker, advised Elvis not to record it. They thought it was too political, too controversial for his image. But Elvis insisted. He connected with the song on a deep personal level. Why? Because Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was born in the ghetto. Not the urban ghetto of the song, but a rural one. He was born in a 2-room shotgun shack in East Tupelo, Mississippi, a place of deep poverty. His family had very little. He remembered the shame of wearing overalls to school and the constant struggle for money. He was that angry young man with a hungry belly. The song tells a story Elvis understood in his bones. He knew what it was like to be poor, to feel like an outsider. His incredible success was a miraculous escape from that life. He had broken the cycle, he had made it out, but did he ever truly escape? In a physical sense, yes. He lived in a mansion, flew in a private jet, and could buy anything he wanted, but emotionally and psychologically, the ghetto never left him. He carried with him a deep-seated fear of poverty. This is one of the reasons he was so reluctant to challenge Colonel Parker's business decisions. The colonel provided financial security, and Elvis was terrified of losing it all and ending up back where he started. This fear kept him trapped in lucrative but unfulfilling contracts. The memory of the ghetto was a chain that held him back. He also retained a sense of being an outsider. Even at the height of his fame, he never seemed to feel completely comfortable in the world of Hollywood stars and high society. He surrounded himself with his friends from back home, the Memphis Mafia. He ate the simple Southern food of his childhood. He created a bubble at Graceland that was, in many ways, a recreation of the close-knit, insulated world he had grown up in. He had escaped the poverty, but he brought the mindset of the ghetto with him. The song's final, tragic verse speaks of the cycle repeating, and as her young man dies, on a cold and gray Chicago morn, another little baby child is born in the ghetto. Elvis broke the financial cycle for his family. His daughter, Lisa Marie, was not born into poverty, but he was unable to break other, more personal cycles. His own life ended on a cold and gray morning, in his own way a victim of the pressures and excesses that his escape from the ghetto had created. And the cycle of tragedy in his family was not over. The pressures of growing up as Elvis Presley's daughter, of inheriting that legacy, would create their own set of struggles for Lisa Marie. When Elvis sang In the Ghetto, he wasn't just telling a story about a boy in Chicago, he was telling his own story. He was the boy who got out. But the song's sad, cyclical nature suggests a deeper truth. You can take the boy out of the ghetto, but you can't always take the ghetto out of the boy. The fear, the insecurity, the feeling of being an outsider, he carried it all with him, from that 2-room shack in Tupelo to the marble halls of Graceland. Number 6, Were They Caught in a Trap? Suspicious Minds was recorded during Elvis's legendary 1969 Memphis sessions and became his 18th and final #1 single in the United States. The song is a powerhouse of emotion, a desperate plea to save a relationship being torn apart by mistrust. The lyrics are raw and direct. We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out because I love you too much, baby. The song describes a vicious cycle. We can't go on together with suspicious minds, and we can't build our dreams on suspicious minds. The love is still there, but it's being poisoned by doubt and jealousy. The music itself reflects this tension, building to a frantic, almost claustrophobic crescendo. The most obvious parallel is to Elvis's marriage to Priscilla. By 1969, the relationship was under immense strain. Elvis was on the road, surrounded by his entourage and female admirers. Priscilla was at home in Graceland, feeling isolated and neglected. The trust between them was eroding. They were caught in the trap of his fame. He couldn't walk out because he loved her and their daughter, Lisa Marie. She couldn't walk out because she loved him, and their life was completely intertwined. The lyrics, "Why can't you see what you're doing to me when you don't believe a word I say," could have been spoken by either one of them. Priscilla felt he didn't understand her loneliness. He felt she didn't understand the pressures he was under. They were living separate lives under the same roof, unable to bridge the gap. The dream they were trying to build was crumbling under the weight of suspicion and distance. They would eventually divorce a few years later, proving that they couldn't, in fact, go on together. But the trap in the song was much bigger than just his marriage. Elvis was caught in several traps, none of which he could walk out of. He was caught in a trap with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. By 1969, Elvis was starting to resent the Colonel's control, particularly the years wasted in Hollywood. But he felt he couldn't walk out. The Colonel had been with him from the beginning. There was a complex bond of loyalty and dependency. Elvis loved him like a father figure, but he was also trapped by him financially and professionally. He was caught in the trap of his own image. He was Elvis Presley, the king. He had to live up to the legend every single day. He couldn't just be a normal person. This image was a trap that kept him isolated and prevented him from having normal relationships. He couldn't walk out because his entire identity and livelihood were tied to it. His lifestyle was a trap. The nocturnal hours, the reliance on prescription drugs to sleep and to wake up, the insular world of Graceland, it was a self-made prison. He loved his home and the comfort of his routine, but it was also a deeply unhealthy environment that cut him off from reality. He couldn't walk out because he was too deep in, and the habits were too entrenched. The song's unique structure, with its false ending and fade out, fade in, even mirrors his situation. Just when you think the song and the struggle are over, it comes roaring back, more intense than before. This was Elvis's life. Just when he seemed to break free creatively, like with the '68 special and the Memphis sessions, the trap of the Las Vegas grind would snap shut again. When he performed Suspicious Minds live, it was an explosive, cathartic event. He would throw himself into the song, physically acting out the lyrics, chopping the air with his hands as if trying to break free. It was more than a performance, it was an exorcism. He was singing about the central tragedy of his life being a man who had everything but freedom. He was caught in a trap and he knew it, and he loved his life, his fame, his family too much to walk out. So he stayed until the trap finally broke him. Number 5, Could He Stop the Tears? Don't Cry Daddy was another hit from Elvis's 1969 comeback period. Like In the Ghetto, it was written by Mac Davis. The song is a heartbreaking conversation between a widower and his young son. The boy sees his father crying and tries to comfort him, saying, "Don't cry, Daddy. Daddy, please don't cry." The boy suggests that they can find a new mommy and that everything will be okay. "I'll be a better boy. I'll be your helper. You'll see just how good I'll be. If you don't cry, Daddy." It's a song about grief, loss, and the innocent, desperate attempts of a child to mend a broken parent. Elvis was deeply moved by the song, reportedly breaking down in tears during the recording session. The parallels to his own life were almost too painful to bear. The most direct connection is to the loss of his own mother. Though the song is about a man who has lost his wife, for Elvis, it was about losing his mother, Gladys. He was the daddy in the song, a man shattered by grief. He had been crying in one way or another since she died in 1958. His sadness was a constant presence in his life, a wound that never healed. The song gave voice to the deep, private sorrow he carried. He was also a father himself. His daughter, Lisa Marie, was born in 1968. He adored her. The song must have resonated with his experience as a new father and his fears about his own mortality and the impact his sadness could have on his child. The most tragic parallel, however, is the one that reverses the roles. In many ways, Elvis was the child in the song, and his own daughter, Lisa Marie, was the one trying to comfort the crying daddy. After his divorce from Priscilla in 1973, Elvis's life began to spiral downwards. His health declined and his drug use escalated. Lisa Marie would split her time between her mother's home and Graceland. During her visits with her father, she witnessed his decline firsthand. She saw him sad, lethargic, and unwell. There are many stories from his final years of a young Lisa Marie trying to take care of her father. She would express concern about the people around him and his state of health. She was a child trying to make sense of a parent's overwhelming sadness and fragility. She was the little voice saying, "Don't cry, Daddy," trying to fix a problem that was far too big for a child to solve. The boy in the song promises, "I'll be a better boy. If you don't cry, Daddy." This is the heartbreaking logic of a child who thinks their parents' unhappiness is somehow their fault. It's a burden no child should have to bear. Lisa Marie grew up in the shadow of her father's immense fame and his equally immense sadness. She had to watch her larger-than-life father slowly fade away. When Elvis sang this song, he was singing about his own past grief. But he was also unknowingly, singing about his future. He was singing about the pain he would cause his own daughter. He was the crying daddy who couldn't be consoled, and she was the child who had to watch, helpless. The song is a sad, sweet story. But in the context of Elvis's life, it's a devastating prophecy. He was a man drowning in sorrow, and not even the love of his own child could save him. He couldn't stop the tears, and he couldn't stop the tragedy that was unfolding. Number 4, why did they go their separate ways? Separate Ways, released in 1972, is a somber, melancholic ballad about the end of a relationship, specifically one with a child involved. The song was recorded shortly after Elvis and Priscilla separated. The lyrics are a painful acceptance of a love that has died. It's over. We're through. We've gone our separate ways. The song is filled with regret and a sense of shared responsibility. Somehow we've changed. It's not the same, and it's so hard to understand why, but the central focus is on the child. But we must be strong and carry on, because there's a little girl at home, and she's the one that needs us most of all. The parents are trying to do the right thing for their daughter, to shield her from their pain. This song is not a metaphor. It is a direct autobiographical account of the end of Elvis's marriage. The little girl at home was his daughter, Lisa Marie. The song is a heartbreakingly honest look at the moment his family fell apart. The lyrics ask a question that Elvis himself must have been asking. Why did we go our separate ways? The song doesn't provide a clear answer, only a vague sense of things having changed. Maybe tomorrow we'll find what we're after and we'll be happy again. But the tone is not hopeful. The separation feels final. In real life, the reasons were complex. Priscilla had grown from a teenage girl into a woman. She wanted her own life, her own identity. She was tired of living in Elvis's shadow, of competing with his entourage and his fame. Elvis, for his part, was trapped in his own world. He was unable to be the husband and partner she needed. His lifestyle, his moods, and his infidelities had pushed them apart. They still loved each other, which made the separation even more painful. It wasn't a bitter, hate-filled breakup. It was a sad, reluctant parting of two people who had grown apart. The song's focus on the child is the most poignant parallel. Elvis was a devoted father. The thought of hurting Lisa Marie was his greatest pain. The lines will have to be so careful that she doesn't see the tears, and will have to smile and hide the pain were his reality. He and Priscilla made a genuine effort to co-parent effectively and to keep their divorce from harming their daughter as much as possible. They famously held hands as they left the courthouse after their divorce was finalized. They were determined to remain a family, even if they were no longer a couple. But the song also hints at a deeper, more solitary separation. Elvis wasn't just going his separate way from Priscilla. He was going his separate way from the world. The divorce marked a significant turning point in his life. He lost the anchor that his family had provided. His isolation deepened. His health and drug use worsened. He was already living a life separate from most of humanity thanks to his fame. But now he was even more alone. He retreated further into the confines of Graceland. The song is about two people parting, but for Elvis, it was also about him drifting away from everyone and everything. He was on his own path, and it was a lonely, self-destructive one. He sang separate ways, with a quiet, devastating sadness. It lacked the theatricality of his other heartbreak songs. This one was too real. It was the sound of a man accepting a painful truth. He had lost his family, and he was now truly on his own. The song is a quiet testament to the moment the king lost his queen and his kingdom began to crumble. Number 3, Was It Too Little, Too Late? Always on My Mind is one of the most famous songs associated with Elvis's later career. He recorded it in 1972, just a few weeks after his separation from Priscilla. The song is a heartfelt apology, a confession of regret from a man who realizes he didn't appreciate his partner until she was gone. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I could have. The chorus is a desperate plea for a second chance, a declaration that despite his failings, his love was real. You were always on my mind. He's admitting his faults, being preoccupied, not saying the right things, not doing enough. It's a song of profound hindsight. He sees his mistakes clearly now that it's too late. This song was Elvis's message to Priscilla. It was his side of the story of their breakup. He wasn't denying his part in the failure of their marriage. He was owning it. He was admitting that he had taken her for granted. The fame, the entourage, the music, the inner turmoil, all of it had consumed him, and he had neglected the person closest to him. The lyrics, little things I should have said and done. I just never took the time perfectly capture the tragedy of their relationship. Priscilla had begged for his time and attention, but he was often lost in his own world. He loved her, but he didn't know how to show it in the small everyday ways that sustain a marriage. He could buy her a diamond ring, but he couldn't sit and have a simple conversation. The timing of the recording is crucial. It was an immediate reaction to the separation. He was in pain, and he poured that pain into the song. His vocal performance is vulnerable and sincere. You can hear the regret in his voice. It's not the voice of the confident king. It's the voice of a man who has lost everything that mattered. But the song's central question is, was it too little, too late? The answer, tragically, is yes. The apology, no matter how sincere, couldn't undo years of neglect. Priscilla had already moved on. She needed to find her own life, away from the suffocating bubble of his fame. A song, even one as beautiful as this, couldn't fix the fundamental problems in their relationship. You know, the sentiment of the song, "You were always on my mind," also speaks to a larger pattern in Elvis's life. He was often physically present, but mentally absent. He was surrounded by people, but his mind was elsewhere, on his music, his spiritual searching, his pain. He wasn't fully present in his own life. By the time he realized what he was missing, the moment had passed. This pattern of too little, too late haunted his final years. He talked about wanting to get healthier, but he never took the necessary steps until it was too late. Or he talked about wanting to do more serious acting or tour the world, but he never broke free from the Colonel's control until it was too late. He seemed to exist in a state of passive regret, always looking back at what he should have done differently. Always on My Mind is a beautiful, timeless song of regret. For Elvis, it was more than that. It was his personal confession and his epitaph. It was the sad summary of a life lived with good intentions but poor execution. He loved deeply, but he failed to show it until the people he loved were gone. The song is a final, painful admission that he understood his failings, but only after he had already lost the chance to make things right. Number 2, Was He Just a Melody Unchained from Pain? In the last months of his life, Elvis's health was in a terrible state. He was overweight, unwell, and exhausted. His live performances were often erratic. Sometimes he was brilliant, but other times he struggled to get through the show. During one of his final concerts, filmed for a TV special in June 1977, he sat down at the piano to sing Unchained Melody. The performance is almost unbearable to watch. He is sweating profusely, his face is pale and puffy. He looks far older than his 42 years. He has to read the lyrics from a sheet of paper. He struggles to catch his breath. But then he starts to sing. Oh, my love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch a long, lonely time. The voice that comes out of this broken man is astonishing. It is pure, powerful, and filled with a raw, desperate emotion. The song is a plea from someone separated from their love, waiting to be reunited. I need your love. Godspeed your love to me. It's a song about longing, about waiting for release from a lonely existence. For Elvis in that moment, the song was not about a lost romantic partner. It was about a lost self. He was hungering for the touch of his own youth, his own vitality, his own health. He was waiting for a release from the pain that was consuming him. The long, lonely time wasn't just a few weeks or months, it was years of isolation and decline. The title itself, Unchained Melody, is a tragic irony. The melody, his voice, was the one thing that could still be unchained. It could soar free from the prison of his failing body. For those few minutes at the piano, he was not the sad, sick man the audience saw. He was a pure, transcendent voice. The melody was free, but the man was chained to his illness, his addictions, and his fame. The lyrics, time goes by so slowly, and time can do so much, must have been particularly resonant for him. Time had done so much to him. It had transformed him from a beautiful, rebellious youth into this tragic figure. And yet, the lonely nights in his Graceland bedroom must have made time feel like it was standing still. When he reaches the song's powerful climax, I need your love, it's a cry from the depths of his soul. It's not a plea to a woman, it's a plea to God, to the universe, to anyone who would listen. He needed help. He needed salvation, he needed to be saved from himself. This performance was one of his last great moments. He died just a few weeks later. It serves as a final, heartbreaking testament to his genius and his tragedy. The contrast between his physical appearance and the beauty of his voice is the story of his life in miniature. The world saw the dazzling, sequined exterior, the king, but inside there was a man in deep pain whose only true release came when he sang. The melody was unchained, but Elvis Presley was not. He was trapped by his legend, by his choices, and by the relentless passage of time. This performance is his final, desperate prayer, a beautiful sound from a man who was falling apart. It's the sound of a soul waiting for a peace that would only come in death. Number one, did he truly do it his way? My Way, a song made famous by Frank Sinatra, became a staple of Elvis's live shows in his final years. The song is a bold, defiant statement of a life lived without regret. And now, the end is near. And so I face the final curtain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway. And more, much more than this, I did it my way. The song is an anthem of self-determination. The narrator looks back on his life and, despite the challenges and setbacks, declares that he was always in control. Regrets? I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. It's the ultimate expression of a life lived on one's own terms. When Elvis sang this song, it was incredibly powerful. Here was the king, the man who had changed the world, reflecting on his unparalleled life. The audience would roar with approval. He was their hero, a man who had seemingly done it all and done it his way. But was it true? The tragedy of Elvis singing My Way is that it was, for the most part, a lie. His life was a study in a lack of control. From the beginning, his career was largely directed by others. Colonel Tom Parker made the decisions. He chose the movies, the songs, the concert venues. Elvis, the man who sang I Did It My Way, was not allowed to tour internationally. He was not allowed to pursue the serious acting roles he craved. For more than a decade, his creative life was dictated by a manager whose primary concern was a steady, predictable income. He did it the Colonel's way. His personal life was also a web of dependencies. He was dependent on his entourage for companionship and to shield him from the outside world. He was dependent on doctors to supply him with the prescription drugs that governed his waking and sleeping hours. He was a man who lived by a strict self-imposed routine, but it was a routine born of addiction and isolation, not of free will. He wasn't choosing his path. He was following the ruts he had worn for himself. The line "regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention," is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of the song when sung by Elvis. His life was filled with regrets. He regretted the years he lost making bad movies. He regretted losing Priscilla. He regretted not being able to live a normal life. He regretted what his fame had cost him. He expressed these regrets to his friends in private, but on stage he had to sing a song that denied their existence. So, why did he sing it? Perhaps it was a form of defiance, a way of convincing himself and the world that he was still in control, even as his life was spiraling out of it. It was a performance of strength from a man who felt weak. It was a mask. Or perhaps, in some small, personal way, he did believe it. He chose to stay with the Colonel. He chose his lifestyle. He chose to take the pills. These may have been destructive choices, but they were his choices. In a life where so much was decided for him, perhaps these small, tragic acts of self-determination were his way of feeling in control. He couldn't control his career, but he could control what he did within the walls of Graceland. It's a dark interpretation, but it may hold some truth. When Elvis belted out the final triumphant lines of "My Way," he was presenting a fantasy to his audience. The fantasy of a life without regrets, lived with absolute freedom. But the man singing was a prisoner of his own legend, a man full of sorrow who had spent most of his adult life doing things someone else's way. The song wasn't his truth, it was his final tragic performance.